Hey Jen, how's it going? Congratulations on the book launch. I'm going to do a reading for everyone now. It's a story called Five Versions of My Husband. Thanks to Joey Grantham for publishing this a couple of months ago. Okay. Version 1. This version of my husband moved out of his house and into me in the early 1990s. It was love at last sight. He was not the man I wanted, but he was the man I got. My name in this version of events is Geraldine. My husband's name at this point was Rex. I've never forgiven my parents for this name, and if names were objects, then this one was a punch bag, which all my bullies and not well-wishers hammered with their bony knuckles. I was working in a bar. It was a small town with small people, and everyone's faces looked like raked mashed potato. The men in the bar all had violently large bellies, and sometimes I wondered if they were going to give birth to something, jettison some stillborn clod of flesh and blood and oily hair onto the beer-sticky floor. And then there was my husband-to-be, Rex. He was stick-thin and dressed in rags. Hey, he said, I haven't eaten in a year. Have you got any food? We've run out, I said. Too bad, too bad. I can do without for a little longer, I guess. Things moved quickly. Every man in this town was a piece of shit and a failure. I'd been on several dates, and the men would always dissect me like a frog. I remember being in that restaurant, Giovanni's, and over a plate of mussels and spaghetti, my date, a piece of lard shaped like a man called Roger, cut my torso open and played my ribs like a xylophone. He also sawed the top of my skull off and wore it like a cap and poked the parts of my brain that would give him the secrets of my mind. He asked me what I like to do in my spare time, and I said, masturbate and chase rats. It was true. I like to follow rats in the streets and count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would be a good day for me counting rats. But Roger, like many men, could look past my idiosyncrasies. I could have been a racist or a paedophile, and he still would have swallowed his pride and fucked me. He took me back to his house then, and he swallowed me whole and spat me back out. I was covered in his goo. But Rex was different. He took me to the opera. We watched fat ladies sing in foreign languages. We went to dinner and watched each other chew and swallow food. We put our fingers in each other's mouths and inspected teeth and picked the food from the crevices. Wow, we were in love. Love happens quickly, I thought, just like a car crash. I was overwhelmed. Rex was a considerate lover and had a penis like a scimitar. I was so ashamed of my own body and believed it was filled with trash. Sex then was a cleaning exercise for us both. Rex, I whispered, I'm filled with garbage. My mom used to tell me so. Can you get it out? Yes, he said. Oh God, yes. He would enter me and scoop out my garbage. Wow, love happens so quickly. Rex ended up leaving his apartment, which was above a bowling alley and beneath another bowling alley, and he popped the question, can I move into you? I was frankly quite flattered, and I said yes. I don't charge rent. Wow, I thought. I am in love. Version 2. This version of my husband has given up the name Rex. I hate it, he would say. He threw his name in the trash and he created a new one, Theodore. This version of my husband was not tall and not thin anymore, but squat and fleshy. You look like a Hungarian wrestler from the 1920s, I told him. Where has this torso come from? You're all torso. I miss those long torsoed days of Rex. Theodore had moved in. We got married a few months earlier, The sweet, hungry man of our youth had been replaced with a man who was always filled. "Geraldine, I think I've got 3 porks stuck in me," he said one evening. 3 porks? They're the ones you cooked the other night. They're lying in the pit of my stomach like docked boats. Well, I don't know what to say or what to do. Shall I call my mum? "It's always with your mother," he said. "Have you ever thought that you shouldn't cook a man like me 3 porks in a week?" I hadn't thought this. Ever since he'd moved in, and ever since we'd been married, he'd become crueler and more critical. In those youthful days of singledom, he would encourage me to speak my mind. Always fight back, Geraldine. Back against the patriarchy. But now it was different. "Why are you the way you are? You don't cook a man 3 porks in a week, not with a torso like this." He once said my mouth and my opinions were too big. Was he right? I doubted myself in everything, and I tried to do the right thing, so I reached inside his asshole and I pulled the 3 porks from his body. It totally wiped him out. He was out for weeks in bed, pale. Version 3. This version of my husband was an intellectual. He's a little older now, and his hair had greyed on both sides. His grey hair gave him an excuse to wear glasses. He enrolled in a university course on literature and gender studies. He'd also taken to wearing woolen jumpers and talking in cafes with other white men and women about intellectual things that went over my head. "She doesn't get it," he said to everyone at the table. I blushed, naturally. I knew what he was talking about, but words wouldn't come out of my mouth when I went to engage. I was paralysed because of all their big words and fierce white faces and conviction. "White people have lots of conviction," I said. They went quiet and chuckled slightly. He started wearing corduroy trousers. I started to become sick of the sight of him. His white flesh was annoying and filled with politics. When I slept next to him at night, I'd press my face into his back fat and submerge myself in his new white intellectualism. Wow, I thought, it's fat. It's so annoying and fat. Even intellectuals wanted hand jobs too, it seemed. And in the middle of the night, he would silently and expectantly guide my hand over to his penis like a JCB grab claw, and he'd help clasp my fingers around his cock. But I was frozen. My hand held his cock like it was something dead. It was just a white root coming out of his body, and I wanted to wrench it out of him, like uprooting a vegetable. I found him repulsive. I found my husband, the intellectual, so sickening that I'd often have to go to the toilet and vomit him away. All my inner body goo and chunks of breakfast, lunch and dinner poured out of me. Am I the only person who thinks of cooking my vomit back as an omelette? I was purging. I was purging so hard that I began to lose weight. I lost some weight on my thighs first, then midsection, and then my face. This intellectual version of my husband did not last. He was having an affair with a fellow student, a girl 10 years younger than I, and she eventually tired of him. I knew it was happening, but I still accepted him back. He kissed my hand one evening and said, "I can change." If there's one thing men can do, it's change, I thought. Version 4. This version of my husband is different types of furniture. Firstly, he's a footrest. I rest my feet upon his arched back and watch TV. Secondly, he's a chair, and I sit in him and wiggle my ass around to get comfortable. Thirdly, he's a dinner table, and I invite some female friends to my house and dine off his stomach and chest. Even though my husband wasn't furniture for long, he was a good man. We created a child together. When you break it down, a child is the marriage of sperm and egg and pure chance, and for this I'm thankful. The child grew in me and made me fat. My feet got bigger, and when the child came out, we both decided to love it unconditionally. This didn't happen. My husband will not admit this readily, but he treated the child badly. Our boy grew up crooked. His bones were bent and he walked funny. But more importantly, his brain was crooked too. He couldn't talk straight, a stutterer. He twitched and would randomly become filled with anger. We didn't know where it came from, but something told me it was my husband. My little boy would quiver when he saw him. We weathered parenthood. Time passed. Our love wavered. One day I loved my husband, but for what reasons, I didn't know. Maybe it was for old time's sake. A lot of people love others because of past events, but actually maybe it wasn't love. I tolerated and stuck with him. He went grey. He put on weight. He said stupid things and irritated me. But I didn't want to die alone. I won't go through that alone, I sung to my child in the form of a lullaby. Version 5. This version of my husband puts pots on his head and bangs them. His name here is Bleeny Thompson, and he's covered in warts and has a horizontal tooth, if you can believe it. Ha ha, bang bang, I have a pot on my head, bang bang. He's become afflicted with some sort of disease, and we don't know which. We don't see doctors, or at least we try our best not to. Our child, Thomas, is in his 20s and will have nothing to do with us. We're sorry for what we did, Thomas. This is what I want to tell him, but we haven't just yet. And so I was alone with this version of my husband. Bleeny Thompson would go into the kitchen and put a pot on his head and bang it with a garlic crusher until my head throbbed. I could feel the veins in my head spider webbing over my skull. I was at my wit's end, but I had to remember he is ill. He is sick. My darling husband is sick. Also, it was too late to leave him now. You should have done it years ago. But now, no. We were rooted in our misery. The misery was sometimes comfortable like a plump bed, but other times it was a brick floor with rats picking at you. Bang bang, ha ha, pots, he said. I eventually got a doctor who said Bleeny Thompson had lost his mind. I asked, well, where is it then, doctor? We can try and look for it, but if you want my advice, he's lost. He's lost to all time. I broke down into what I thought were tears, but no. We had to remember the good times. I made a timeline in our living room of all the events that had happened in our lives. All the love, all the loss, the creation of a child, the places we'd been, the places we thought we would go, the different versions of my husband. And when the timeline was complete, I saw it all now. Our love was as long as a living room, as wide as a table, and there I was next to it, exactly the same as they had always expected me to be. Thank you.